Okay, we are at assignment number 2, class. This is going to be a project schedule. I want to get you exposure, as I find most students at any level have very little exposure to Microsoft Project, and it is one of the standard tools and something certainly that can be beneficial to you in terms of how to create a schedule using a solid tool. It's what I use, and I've used it for years, and I want you guys to have some experience with it. I think it will be helpful also to produce a project schedule, in this case from a template, so you don't have to start from zero, which is of course always advisable in project management. It will help you kind of think a little bit like a project manager would as you're trying to organize a project, which is exactly the purpose of assignment number 1 as well. And just like assignment number 1, we are going to use Web Campus Replacement Hypothetical Project to create this schedule. So let's dive into this a little bit here. If we look, we'll want to remind you that you need to have Microsoft Project on this, and this is something you can take a look at the syllabus for with reminders about that, and I won't go any further into that, but by now you should have this. We're going to look at some example projects here, and I'm going to walk you through this assignment in Microsoft Project using the default template from your sample organization, Henderson. And note that everything I'm going to walk through is listed here, and I'll remind you, you're going to want to follow this exactly in the sequence in which it's listed in here. If you don't, you're going to hate this assignment, I can tell you now. If you do, this is going to roll, and it's going to be maybe even an enjoyable exercise for you guys. So do it step by step, don't go out of order. And I'm going to follow this sequence and show you how this assignment should be done. So we are going to come back to these examples, and here is your schedule template, COH default. This is in your class site in the templates. And if you look here in the sample template here, we've got just over 100 tasks or so. Now, when I say tasks, activities and tasks are synonymous, mean the same thing, and you can use them interchangeably. Usually I say tasks in Microsoft Project. And these tasks in bold here are not real tasks. That's important. They're summary tasks. They reflect the tasks below them. So you can see this indented structure here. So you will not want to change these once you've decided that they represent what you want. So for example, if I collapse all of these, you'll see here that these are the phases in your sample organization in Henderson. These are the ones we use. Now, you can change these if you want to, and you can leave them if you want. Whatever phases you think would be good for your hypothetical Web Campus Replacement project, you can use. Now, these are all in bold. These are summary tasks. They just reflect what's below them. So if you can change the names of them, you can add more if you want to, restructure this using the linkages, or rather the indentations up here, and that's cool. Or you can leave them as they are. Remember, I know you're not project managers, and just like with assignment number 1, I do not expect perfection from this. I just want you to play with it. Get a little familiar with it, kind of start to think like, oh wow, this could be an interesting tool if I'm managing a project for a schedule here. And if you take a stab at it, you're going to be happy, I assure you. If you don't, you will not. In any case, if we look at this, the first thing you're going to want to do is identify any changes that you want to make in this. So for example, in the tasks is what I'm talking about. Any changes to the task. So probably identify project funding is a good idea for any project. You probably want to keep that. And a lot of these will make sense to you because they're there to remind you to do these things. And you might want to consider them for your own schedules. I might want to schedule a kickoff. I got to update the project schedule based on that meeting. Yes, so a lot of this is going to apply to you. Project charter, you know what that is. Maybe in this case, there is no legacy system to decommission. You're not replacing something. In this case, you guys are replacing something. But as an example, if we wanted to let's say, not include this in your schedule. It's just like Excel. You can right click and delete. You can undo. So probably you'll want to keep that one. But let's suppose I want, I've got a good example for you. Here, down in procurement. So you know this is a phase for us because procurement sucks. It's really cumbersome in government. It seems to be inescapable, although we try to improve it all the time. And how much do you think a project like Web Campus replacement is going to cost? Is it going to cost less than 50K or more than 50K? Probably more than 50K. So this thread is a process that we follow for things that are less than $50,000. And so I know probably I'm not going to need it. So I literally can delete it from this schedule. And it's going to say all the subtasks below this summary tasks are going to be deleted too. That's fine. I don't need this on the end of that either. I can delete that too. And now I've got a few other tasks. I can delete them just like in Excel all at once that were associated with that thread. Now I've got just $50,000. And that's probably the way you're going to want to do this. So if you want an RFP, which means we're going to publish to the world requirements for what we want for replacing Web Campus, and you're going to reevaluate those responses and so on. Let's make a selection based on those responses. You can do that formal process. And if you don't want to go to RFP because you already know the product you're going to pick, or you want to do an informal process, then we can do that as well. And it's up to you. So if you decide you wanted to go to do a more formal process to make sure you find out from the world what's out there in terms of Web Campus learning replacement products like learning management systems, if you don't want the RFP, then you can kill this whole thread here. Yep, summary tasks, that's fine. If you do want to keep it and you decide that's the way to go and you want to eliminate this without RFP grouping here, you can delete that too. And fine. So you'll see here that however you choose, you're just going to make modifications to the tasks. You may determine that some of the stuff is extraneous. You know, if you do the RFP route, there's a lot of steps involved in that illustrate how you actually follow a request for proposal RFP process. And that's putting it out to the world to say, what have you got that's going to satisfy my solution to replace Web Campus in this particular example. And when you're done, you go to contract and you actually make the purchase, and then you go into execution here, and you're going to configure a test environment, whether that's on premises or whether that's in the cloud, because usually that's best practice. And then you're going to continue on to do some testing and training, implementation based on production. And when you're live, you're going to close out the project. So any tasks in here that you think you might want to adjust to be more reflective for your own project. Let's say you want to make it more of development centric or more cloud hosted centric or not. Totally up to you. But go through the tasks. Keep what you want, kill what you don't want, change some of the names as necessary. It shouldn't take you too long to take a stab at that. Don't expect it to be accurate. Take a swing. That's critical, because once you have done that, if you're following the process, the next step in this is that you want to establish your predecessor relationships. So you'll know that finish to start is the most common relationship. That means this task has got to finish task A before task B can start. And for the purposes of this assignment, that's all you need to consider. All the tasks by default are already linked. So is task 0 here? Is this a task? No, it's not. It's a summary task. So don't consider it when you're creating the relationships between tasks. This is the best practice that I found. Is task number 1 a real task? No, it's not. It's in bold. It's therefore a summary task. We're not going to put linkages together that involve summary tasks. Task number 2, this is a real task. Technically, there is no predecessor, nothing before task number 2. Therefore, it is going to remain blank. Task 3, this is a real task, and it does have a task before it, a real task, task 2. Therefore, in the template, we have that predecessor relationship linked. Task 3 as a predecessor of task 2, meaning that task 3 cannot start until task 2 finishes. That's finish to start relationship. And this is established all through here. As we go down, you'll notice the summary tasks don't have it. And so the predecessor for task 14 is task 10. It's the last task before task 14. That's a real task. You want to link them up just like that. Task 3 is linked to task 2. Task 4 is linked to task 3. Task 5 is linked to task 4, and so on. So long as we're always talking about real tasks, not summary tasks. Summary tasks we never link. As you modify this schedule, you may delete and add things that will potentially modify what's here in the default, and you want to be aware of that. So that's why we modify the tasks first, add, delete, change, then we establish the predecessor relationships. And as you've done that, okay, you'll see the value of why we do that, because the next step in this is to establish the start date. Okay, this is the only date you ever want to change, and the reason we can do that is that your predecessor tasks will allow one change anywhere in the schedule, as long as all tasks are linked, to be reflected from that point forward in time. So watch this. Let's say 2020 is just a default that comes up in here. I want this project to start, let's say we're planning for sometime, fall, September 1st, 2021. Well, look at that. I changed that date. And by the way, if you pick a date that's not a working day, which in this case in Henderson at this time we work 4 10-hour days. So Fridays we don't work, which is kind of nice. And if you schedule something in this default schedule on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, it's going to prompt you and say, are you sure you want to do that? That's not a working day. Why don't you let me push this date to the next working day? And you can say okay, and it will do that. So in this case, we picked Wednesday, which is a working day. You could modify the default schedule in this to a 5-day work week if you prefer, but it's not needed. If you want to go nuts with that, feel free. In any case, as we go through here, you can see I just changed this one date, yet anything in blue represents something that's changed. And look at this blue, it goes all the way down here. I pushed out the start date, and everything else, based on the duration that's identified for the task, was also pushed out all the way down. So as long as we have the linkages, we can see this change is reflected for every single task below that task that I changed. And if they're all linked, it goes all the way to the end. Are they? Let's find out. This is all in blue. I know it's all changed. Oh, look here. The blue stops here. Why? Why does the blue stop here? It stops here because task 60, what's the predecessor for task 64? It has none. What should it be? It should be task 60. So that's why this chain broke, and that's a problem for you. And I did this to illustrate to you guys that you want to make sure your predecessors are linked all the way down the chain. Otherwise, when you make changes in your dates and durations, they will not be reflected, and you'll have to try to modify the dates individually, and you never want to do that. It's a nightmare. So to fix this, I'll just put 60 here as my task, and bam, notice the rest of that change happened all the way down the line. Okay, so with that change in place, now if I went up here and I picked another date for my start date here, you can see you can double click on some of these fields and you can get more options on how to do things. Notice double clicking on this, by the way, I get that, but if I try to hover here, I don't get a date box. Why? You can see me illustrating that that's a summary task. You don't ever want to mess with it. In fact, in this case, to change the date, it doesn't let you because it just reflects the task dates below, okay, for start and finish. Here's how you can see in this overall summary task, here is the start of this project and here's the end. And that's really cool, right? So at a glance, you can see the duration of the project. So the first task start date is here. I'm going to change this. Oh, let's say if I picked a working day, Saturday. Oh, that's a non-working day. And will you allow us to move it to the next working day, which is Tuesday the 7th? I think Monday is a holiday in 2021, on the 6th of September. In any case, you can see I made the change. It moves the start date out a few days, and that change was reflected. Every task got moved out by a few days, all the way to the end. Isn't that awesome? So, having done that, as you follow your instructions, the next thing you're going to want to do is remember that any task that's identified as a milestone task has a 0-day duration. And as you go through this, you can make any task you want a 0-day duration task by just putting 0 in the duration, and that will make it a milestone. And all that means is that it's some kind of significant accomplishment that you want to call attention to. Oh, when you finish this task, this was a vendor is selected. That's a big deal. We want to call that out as a milestone. Here, we finally got approval from council. Of course, in your organization, you may not have a council, so you might want to delete this portion and say it's the organization's board of directors or the right executive level of approval, or whatever it is, or maybe no approval required. You can delete this depending on your organization. In any case, for us, that's a milestone, so we call that out. That's just something to note, as you noticed when we get into the durations in a minute, that those 0 days just mean you've identified the task as a milestone task. Something to celebrate as you go through, and potentially something to look at going through the next toll gate to the next portion or phase of the project. You want to identify that you've made the right progress prior to going through that toll gate. And that's optional as a process, and in case something germane to this conversation, but nothing you need to worry about for this assignment. Just that if it's 0 days, it means it's a milestone. That's all you need to know. And as we continue down through the directions here, just to recap, we've modified the tasks. We've specified the predecessor relationships. We changed just the first date of the first real task. The last thing you got to do here is just change the durations to reflect what you think is more realistic. These are the default durations that Microsoft Project assigns when you create a schedule. That's why they have a question mark, so it reminds you, hey, this is not real. We just gave you a number to start this off. Does it take 1 day to identify project funding for a project like this? Probably not. You can just go through here a meeting to call that involves the stakeholders in this project, which can be all the departments within the organization. That could take 12 days to get scheduled and occur. And maybe it's a day in reality to update the schedule, but it's the draft schedule if you had one that's at that time, which of course this is your draft schedule. So you update it after you meet the first time. And the actual kickoff meeting that involves everyone, in this case, the distinction here is just the IT resources, so being a little bit more granular there, this one would be all departments and this one would be just IT resources, but that could involve multiple departments because depending on how IT is structured, it could be decentralized. In any case, you don't really need to worry too much about all the details involved. Just take a look. How long do you think it would take to conduct a kickoff meeting and get it taken care of? Maybe a day, maybe 2 days, maybe 10 days, whatever you think. The charter, how long to put that together? Maybe that's 2 weeks. And all these other ones. You may not be terribly familiar with what they are, but that's fine. The idea is just to get a feel for this. Just start estimating, it feels like, maybe, okay, now interviews in this process, if there's a bunch of vendors we're doing interviews with, that could take us, whatever you feel. Just change all these durations all the way down the chain. Remember, don't change the bold ones because they're summary tasks. They're not real tasks. And once you've got that squared away, you can leave the milestones at 0 if you like. You can change some tasks to 0 if you like. Once you've done that, you'll notice anytime you change a duration anywhere in the task at this point, everything else below it rolls, I call it. Everything else, you push one task out by 30 days, every other task below gets pushed out by 30 days. Why? Because you have your predecessor relationships identified. Okay? So when you're done with specifying the durations, that's it. If you wanted to go nuts, you could specify % complete for these tasks. In reality, of course, you would do that as a project manager as you make progress against these. You could specify the resource names assigned to these as a project manager. You really would do that in most cases in the real world. For this assignment, you don't have to worry about that. Of course, as we increment percent completes here, and as these get to 100% complete, the overall percent complete will reflect that, and that's how you know where you are with your project at a glance. But the percent complete and resource names, don't worry about that. That's something that you need to do with this assignment. Although, if you want to, you can feel free to. When you're done with this, you're going to upload it to the class site. That is it for this assignment. Now, real quick, I want to give you guys some examples of how project schedules look in the real world. There's a number of different projects here. This was a very phased approach for this project, so it was a little bit customized compared to normal. And you can see here that we have this broken out by these time frames for these summary tasks. It took 4 years to complete this project. It was a big deal, huge cultural change for asset management. 163 tasks in the schedule. Replacing 911 system, the CAD, computer aided dispatch system. When you call up for 911, that system that dispatches police and all the other things that it does, records management and so many other things. Replacing that system is huge, multi-million-dollar project. You can see, looking at the schedule, all the things identified in here. This schedule is something like 600 tasks, massive, not reflective of most schedules. Probably a little bit more detailed because we're spending millions of dollars, and that's exactly what you would expect. The more cost and complexity involved, the more details you need to get to eliminate the risks, mitigate the risks. We'll talk more about risks later on in a future module. Here in Windows 10, this is a project that's structured with its schedule by rollout. We're replacing Windows 7 with Windows 10, and the rollout is structured by departments. So IT would go first as a guinea pig, and then HR goes next, city clerk goes next, etc., etc. And we have this thing broken down by department as it rolls out. And you can see here just shy of around 200 tasks, not too bad. You can see here that this is that kind of project where it probably makes sense to break it down that way. If we look here at one more example, open data. This open data project is based on, actually your assignment number 1 is the template for that charter. It comes from this pilot project originally. And this was not that big of a schedule, 43 tasks. And you can see here, if we look at the summary tasks only, pretty standard. And you can see here the start and finish dates as well. You can add the summary task to this for the very top if you want to, that shows them all like the one that we have does at the very top. And usually that's what I do. And for most of our projects, it's a default. But you can slice it and dice it differently based on your needs. If it works for you, it works, right? So going back to the slide deck, this is exactly what I just went through for you guys. And if you follow this step by step, your assignment number 2 will work for you very well. And good luck. I'm sure it will be hopefully something that will open your eyes to some degree.